I warmly welcome you to the 2023 ESPAS annual conference today. Thank you so much for joining online and here in the room. And I am very happy. My name is Antje Kollowald. I'm very happy to be your Master of Ceremony today. My job will be to guide you through the program, and which is packed with a high number of really excellent speakers, and I'm really looking forward to the sessions. And speakers from Europe and other parts of the world. But before we go there, a few housekeeping points, and I promise I'll be short. So please keep your mobiles on silent. And we are in the Berlaymont, and those of you who don't have a badge from the institutions, please refer to one of our colleagues to guide you out of the building and out of the hall. On the program, we have 7 sessions today. So there will be coffee breaks, promised. There will be 2 coffee breaks and a lunch break as well. And if you need a coffee in between, please keep your voice low, because everything will happen behind you. So coffees and lunches will be served just behind you in this space. We as well have the opportunity to ask questions today here in the room, so please make use of that. After most of the sessions, we'll be able to ask questions. And I'm very happy to introduce Christophe Brackelere, who is here today to help us with the visual harvesting. He's an expert in visual harvesting, and he will try to capture the main messages in drawings. So please go and see him and pass messages and engage with him during the breaks. There is as well, in the back of the room, there's a blue board where you can leave messages when you're at coffee and you're discussing. And the members of the ESPAS, the Young Talent Network, are there to capture your messages about the main global trends shaping the future of the EU. So we'll see. We as well encourage you to share your presence and your highlights here on your social media channels, and please use the hashtag ESPAS for these, so we can capture that as well. Now, it's time to get in the heart of the matter, and we are going to set the scene together. And actually, I've finished now. My first job is to welcome very warmly Stephen Quest on screen, on stage here, who is the chair of ESPAS and the Director General of the Joint Research Center of the Commission, and he will formally open the conference. Welcome, Stephen, please.
Thank you so much, Antje, and good morning. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many people here in the room, in the Berlaymont, and so many people online as well. Welcome to this 2023 ESPAS conference, and our theme for this year, Building Europe's Future, Time for Strategic Choices. This is actually the 11th time now that the Commission and the Parliament have come together to co-organize one of what's now, I think, one of the most established events in the European calendar. And I'm really pleased that this time we're able to welcome a vice president from each of the 2 institutions who have a particular responsibility for foresight. So a very warm welcome to Executive Vice President Šefčovič and Vice President Engel, and also a special welcome to Minister Labib and Minister Lohmann, and we look forward to your interventions in the opening session shortly. I'll be very quick, I promise, because we want to get to you as fast as possible. It's very special, actually, that this is the first time in 4 years we managed to do this in person. And I think online events are fantastic. It's a great way of connecting, but seeing people face to face as well brings something very special. I'm really happy we're able to do this here. It's actually my 3rd ESPAS conference, and it's a real pleasure to be able to play a role in leading this interinstitutional process. I think the presence here today of 2 vice presidents, 2 ministers, and a really excellent array of speakers, both from Europe and beyond, is a testimony to our convening power in ESPAS, but also, I think, to the core of the work we're trying to do in ESPAS, this pursuit of strategic foresight in a political environment, which is not always easy, but I think it's important that we're able to bring together actually 9 different European institutions and bodies in ESPAS to try to offer some pathways to the future that policymakers can explore and perhaps also help identify some of the policy choices for the future. And we meet at this time at quite an important moment. We're just 6 months before the people of Europe will go to the polls in the European elections. And so in anticipation of this next institutional cycle that we're leaning into, we want this conference to really be a kickstarter for some of the strategic choices that we're going to have to take as Europeans in the coming period. So this program is deliberately designed to try to tease out some of these main global trends and to identify the important linkages and connections between these things, whether it's around the future of democracy, whether it's around the impact of technology in our societies, whether it's around social and economic implications, the green transition, global governance. There's a hell of a lot for us to really get to grips with over the day we have ahead of us. And next spring, our intention in ESPAS is to then publish the 4th ESPAS Global Trends Report. The idea here is to publish a report every 5 years to try to identify some of the main global trends, the impacts they're going to have on Europe and elsewhere, and hopefully to offer some creative ideas about how we might make the right strategic choices going forward. And this conference, I think, opening up discussion in a very transparent way is an important part of that, because foresight is about challenging long-term assumptions. We need to learn from each other. We need to learn from others. So it's great that today we've got also an international component to our program. Delighted that some of the representatives of organizations that we engage with as ESPAS internationally are with us today. Thank you very much for joining. And a particular thank you also to our Honorary President, James Ellis, who's in the audience today, both for being with us today, but also for having had the idea of kickstarting this process back in 2010. We've come a long way, and I hope we still have some good progress to make it ahead of us as well. One final thing to mention before closing. Yesterday, we had an ESPAS organized foresight workshop, bringing together foresight practitioners from the EU agencies, from member state governments, from international organizations like the OECD. That gave us an opportunity to showcase some projects, to share knowledge, and to foster collaboration. I think this is exactly the kind of initiative that we want to see in ESPAS, and where we can really get benefit from working together. So in a few seconds, we're going to get underway with our opening session. I hope you find the program interesting. It's certainly very, very dense, and we've carved out time, as Antje said, in the sessions for you to engage and ask questions as well. So please do, and above all else, please enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for your setting the scene. So now I will not talk much, but I would like to, in a minute, welcome on the stage here for the first session on building Europe's future, the panelist Hadja Labib, Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Affairs and Foreign Trade and Federal Cultural Institutions of Belgium. Welcome. And Anna Luhrmann, who is the Minister of State for Europe and Climate from Germany. And we have Executive Vice President Maros Šefčovič in charge of Green Deal, Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight from the European Commission, and Vice President Marc Angel, Member of Parliament, Vice President, and with responsibility for ESPAS. And the moderator will be Rosa Balfour, Director, Carnegie Europe. And I would like to ask the ministers and the moderator to come on stage, and Vice President Šefčovič to have a few introductory remarks, because both of them will have a few remarks. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. First and foremost, to my esteemed colleague here in the panel, it's indeed the pleasure that we have incoming presidency already with us, that Hadja Labib, the minister, will take over the presidency very soon, and we are so happy to have her here, because we can already discuss how can we push the topic of the foresight and keep it strong, live and kicking also during the next presidency. I also would like to appreciate the participation of Anna Luhrmann in our discussions, because I'm sure that you are following very well the European affairs, and you know that she's one of the most fervent advocates of the reform, how the European institutions working, what should be the next structure of the EU, and how can we prepare the European Union for having more participants, more members, and to be strong, and of course to be efficient and functional at the same time. I would like to welcome especially Marc Angel. We've been discussing with the European Parliament and the services in European Parliament for quite some time that it's great to have the discussion on that top quality level, expert talks and exchanges, but it's very important also to have the top political representative who would be responsible for this cooperation in the field of foresight. And I'm very glad that we found such a person, eloquent speaker, and with appropriate position of the Vice President in the European Parliament, who is looking after these very important files in key European institutions. And thank you very much for being here. James Ellis started this process for quite some time ago. We are very happy that he's still keeping an eye on making sure that these developments progress. But to end with thanks, I also would like to thank Stephen Quest and Pascal Leardini, because you can imagine that you cannot accomplish all these efforts and such a progress without a very strong engine room. And the Secretariat General and JRC have been absolutely key in making sure that we can actually get the best potential from the services in the Commission. We set up the network of correspondents for the foresight at every DG. We've been harvesting the ideas coming to the European Commission from all walks of life, from all colleagues who are represented in the ESPAS networks, and of course from very rich international exchanges we had. So we can distill it, we can prepare it, and we can really use it for the foresight in the Commission. So a lot has happened since we started with the foresight, not only on expert but also on the political level, and therefore it's indeed my pleasure to be here and to open what is the fourth ESPAS conference under this mandate. It's our last one under this Commission's mandate. And of course, it would give us the opportunity to take the stock, what we have achieved together, how we've been using strategic foresight, and how we've been building this modern tool of anticipatory governing, and how we'll be using this collective intelligence for better decisions for the future. My colleagues would recall that from the beginning, I was saying that for the foresight to be useful for the political leaders, it has to be actionable. We always have to not only say what is wrong, what is good, what are the developments, but what concrete actions we should take to make sure that we will get to that scenario of the future we would like to see. I was, of course, also highlighting the fact that we can consider foresight strategic only if it leads to strategic decision, that it has to be linked to the decision-making process, to the policy-making. Otherwise, we would stay on the level of think tanking, which is also very, very important, but at the top of the political institutions, you have to have that strategic link with the top-level leaders for making sure that foresight indeed is used in a way which leads to the key decisions for the future. And of course, to achieve that, it must be useful for the political leaders. They must see, yeah, this is something which opens new perspective. This is, I would say, the chapter we need to open, and it's good to have such a look into the future, because it helps me to take the good decisions today. So this was, I would say, our goals when we started with the strategic foresight on the political level 4 years ago. And I think that if you look back today, I think we can clearly say that we have succeeded in putting strategic foresight at the heart of our policy making. And I think this was, as I was just referring seconds ago, a key part of the mission which I undertook in 2019. Indeed, in the context of increasing and more interlinked shocks and disruptions, sometimes we say that we live too much of a history over the last 5 years, but I think that more of a crises we have in Europe, in the world, more of the problems we are faced with, that just underlines that we need to develop even greater strategic foresight capacities and long-term strategic thinking in the future. And I would say that it applies to both European but also member states level. And I think that our joint and collective work over the past 4 years has prepared the ground well for this future. First, if we look at the 4 editions of our annual strategic foresight report, we can also testify that they indeed helped us not only to test, but also shape the EU's strategic objectives and priorities against the future risk and the megatrends. You would recall that our first strategic foresight during the COVID crisis was very much focused on importance of resilience, of European economy, of European democracy, of European system. And I'm glad to say that after our first 2 pillars, when we started with the mandate of Ursula von der Leyen Commission, that to the green and digital, also the pillar of resilience was added. Later on, we clearly felt that in this new dynamic world that we need to develop more the concept of geopolitical dimension of resilience, and that simply if we want to build the climate neutral future for our planet, for our mankind, we have to use different tools, and one of them is let's test the ways how we can go beyond traditional GDP, where also the activities which preserve our planet, which are good for the mankind, which are promoting sustainability way of life, are rewarded and not punished by the economic indicators. And I'm glad that this also found a reflection in a top document of the European Social Summit in Porto, with this reference included, because that helped us to open the way of thinking, how can we offer this alternative assessment of the economy, and now, I mean, the thinking and the work on resilience dashboards, on going beyond the GDP concept is going on, and I believe that it could be, in the future, very important contribution of European thinkers to the way how we should measure this new sustainable economy of the 21st century. And to finish off with our last strategic report, you know that after intense debate among the policy thinkers, but also on the political level, we came up with the concept of strategic autonomy, which, as we see in this new geopolitical world, in this new geo-economic competition, it's a very important concept, and now, I mean, it's a buzzword which we all use, because we know that Europe in the 21st century have to be deciding on our policies in strategic manner. We have to be more autonomous, and we have to have this perspective, have Europe first in comparison with other important geopolitical players. We also developed the tools, the instruments to work with the foresight. So the colleagues in the Commission would know that we are now presenting in regular manner the horizon scanning reports, where we are again harvesting the knowledge for our ESPAS experts, and we are sharing these new signs of changes with the members of the college, with our services, just to have, I would say, the finger on the heartbeat of what's new, what's happening, not to be surprised with any trend or tendencies, and just to be aware what is happening in the world, be it from the technological, environmental point of view, or simply the new trends we should be clearly aware of. On top of it, the foresight so-called box is now part of every legislative or policy proposals, and foresight also became part of our impact assessment because we want to make sure that our proposals are future-proof as much as possible, and therefore that Windows is there just to make sure that we'll not forget about the dynamism of today's work, where we need to be able to adjust, to update, to recalibrate our proposals, because the dynamics of today's lives has clearly accelerated and changed if you compare it with the past. Third element I would like to underline is that for foresight to be successful, it really has to be a collective effort, and I'm extremely thankful to all of you who help us to increase this participatory foresight cooperation within ESPAS, of course, but also within the member states. In ESPAS, we have the whole European institutions represented, but with the support of my colleagues usually the ministers responsible for European affairs. We set up the EU-wide network of ministers for the future. And I have to say that it's also good chance for the ministers to kind of depart for a couple of hours from the daily routine of decision making, solving the problems, and to kind of put the thinking head on and strategize a little bit what the next year, what the next years, what the next decade would look like, and how we as Europeans want to participate and shape these developments. And I think that the usefulness of strategic foresight is clearly proven also by the fact that we see more and more prime ministers developing their capacities, capabilities. Now in every EU member states, you have units who are specializing in foresighting, and very often they're working very closely with the prime ministers. We have seen how useful the foresight unit was in Spain for developing the concept for 2050, but also in other member states where foresight units are preparing the programmatic documents with a long-term perspective and trying to incorporate all the collective wisdoms we gathered over a few years since we are working together. I was, of course, very pleased and like to thank my colleagues that thanks to the great cooperation between the ESPAS, European Commission, but also Spanish presidency, we managed to contribute to the flagship document which was discussed by the leaders in the informal European Council in Granada, because this is how we prove that foresight is key for the top decision making in Europe, so that we can contribute to the good discussions and bring the arguments which are needed to fuel the discussion among the leaders when they're planning their future steps. So to conclude, I would like just to say that all this led to further build-up of the joint intelligence on common perception of the developments taking place in Europe, but also around the world. And all this would be contributing to the new edition of Global Trends report, which is again a very respected publication, which we do with a certain time delays, so we can see how the world and our assessment of the trends is evolving. And the Global Trends reports we would like to present early next year, and I'm sure that it will be the document which again would shape the thinking, consideration, and planning for the next years. So to conclude, once again, I would like to thank all the community of foresight enthusiasts in the EU institutions all over Europe, but also our international friends coming to our conference and working with us from all corners of the world. I would like to thank my esteemed panelists and Marc Angel for the great cooperation with the European Parliament. And thank you very much for the attention. And of course, as everyone, I'm looking forward not only to our panel's discussion, but for the main takeaways from the conference, which is extremely well organized with high-level guests coming here from all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Vice President. And can I please ask you to take the floor, Vice President Ankel? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antje. Good morning to all, dear ministers, dear Maros, dear Stephen, ladies and gentlemen. It's a genuine pleasure to join Maros in opening this year's ESPAS annual conference. And this is my first ESPAS conference, and I was delighted when President Roberta Metsola asked me earlier this year to take over the responsibility in the Parliament for foresight. Once again, the Parliament and the Commission have worked closely together to co-produce a conference that is rich in content and boasting a lineup of excellent experts and speakers. For over a decade now, 9 European Union institutions and bodies, including my own, the Parliament, have worked together in this collaborative interinstitutional foresight process. We have enhanced our understanding of global trends impacting on us, and we have developed the use of foresight as a tool in policy making. And what is very important, we are sharing our collective intelligence. And I think we can take some pride in what has been achieved. Apart from developing the habit of working together, not always something that comes very naturally here in Brussels, I believe ESPAS has also acted as a nudge to our member organizations, and indeed elsewhere also in the member states, to embed foresight in their day-to-day work. And the presence on the stage today of 2 ministers for the future is proof of the rise in foresight practice across the European Union, and especially also in all our member states. Many of you here today, and indeed also those who are watching us online, may not need to be persuaded of the merits of anticipatory governance. To you, these are probably self-evident, but others perhaps remain to be convinced of foresight's inherent value to good policy making. Foresight is not about predicting the future. It is rather about finding ways of creating the futures we want and avoiding those futures we do not want. In the European Parliament, we have developed foresight capabilities over many years, first in the spheres of science and technology, and more recently also in strategic foresight. And I can tell you, I've visited all these units, and it's wonderful to see how motivated and how proud they are to do this work, and also that a lot of young talent is included in these teams, and this is, I think, very useful to all of us. In recent months, we in the Parliament, we have produced 2 very significant reports. First of all, the Future Shocks 2023 report, and also a very interesting report called Strategic Foresight Conversation on the Future of the Relationships between the European Union and Ukraine 2035. So please go to our websites and have a look at these interesting reports. And both of these papers are examples of where foresight and political decision-making come together. And Maros, you underlined it quite rightly in your speech, that foresight has to be useful for politicians, and it has to make the link between the policy making. And as far as I can tell, in my personal experience as a legislator in the European Parliament, the documents produced by our European Research Service, by the foresight units, they're quite useful, believe me, when we work on resolutions, when we work on legislation, when we prepare to go to shadow meetings or to trilogue meetings. So I can only thank not only the experts in the European Parliament, but all of you, because it's, as I said, collective intelligence, which is very, very important. At this conference, leading experts from across Europe and beyond have come together to debate today's theme, Building Europe's Future, Time for Strategic Choices. We are approaching the next European elections and a new EU institutional cycle in the coming year. So now is the perfect time to debate how the European Union might approach the challenges it faces between now and 2040. Like the rest of the world, Europe faces many challenges. War on our eastern and also on our southern borders, climate change, and the scourge of inequalities, to just name a few. But, ladies and gentlemen, these challenges are there to be overcome. In life, you have a choice between accepting what seems inevitable, or you can explore new and creative ways of overcoming the challenges we face. So often governments and politicians can seem to voters to be behind the curve, running to catch up with the events, and sometimes apparently unable to make things better. And this is where foresight comes into its own. Few things in life are certain, except, as Benjamin Franklin famously said or told us, death and taxes. If we can see today where things are going wrong and where the trends do not look good, we have in our power to do something about it. Too often we think that the bad trends we see in the world are incapable of being changed. Not true. Of course, when we look ahead, the challenges seem great, and at times the hurdles perhaps seem too high to overcome. But if politicians can step outside, even for a moment, to see beyond the next few days or weeks or beyond the next election, it is possible to imagine different futures and indeed better ones. This won't happen by wishing things can be better. The work to design a better future can come through using foresight thinking in smart and also in innovative ways. At this conference and in the forthcoming ESPAS Global Trends report, I hope we can help to shape the debate leading up to the next year's European elections, offering some new ideas and new perspectives. It is indeed, as the title of our conference says, time for strategic choices. Europe has what it takes to be a force for good in the world, a leader in the technologies of tomorrow's and a powerhouse in the energy transition. We can modernize our economies, we can prepare our people for the new job opportunities of tomorrow. We can do all these things and more and deliver for people if we can anticipate better and if we can prepare better. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you both Vice Presidents for your both co-hosting the ESPAS conference. So thank you for your introductory word. And now hand it over to Rosa for the moderation. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you very much. I would like to dive straight into the conversation. I've heard the word collective being mentioned more than once, and indeed, when we talk about the EU, one of its unique features is that when it acts collectively, it can really take advantage of its scale and size. So on the one hand, we have the EU institutions that can provide a long-term perspective, a perspective of competence and technocracy that enables us to pursue long-term goals, intergenerational goals, but also we need the member states for political commitment and for identifying those items that are compelling for political leaders at home and that can bring our citizens into the equation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn to our Minister Labib and ask you about the Belgian experience with foresight and also what you're preparing, given that Belgium is about to take the presidency of the EU.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Indeed, we are fully involved in preparing the next presidency of the European Union. And indeed, we will have two key moments or two main tasks, if I may. First of all, as we will have the end of the legislature, we have to finalize the legislative work and to try our best to finalize a large number of files. It is not the most funny part of the work, but it's very important. And secondly, the strategic agenda part, which will give political orientation to the next commission. And in this space, foresight and anticipation will have a central role. Forward thinking will be most helpful to tackle the current and also the future challenges, and I'm thinking of climate change, migration, enlargement, security, rule of law, and this topic will be our key priorities for the Belgian presidency, as you will see on December the 8th, when our Prime Minister and I will present our program for the 6 months of our presidency. And aside from the presidency, we have also invested more permanently in foresight within the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although it is quite a new discipline, an ambassador has been appointed as senior coordinator for foresight and the future of Europe for the first time, and he worked closely with our ministry think tanks, the Egmont Institute, and for which foresight is also a key research area. And we have set up a dedicated network with stakeholders coming from Belgium, but also from EU circles, and their reflection and reports will also feed in the program of our presidency.
Thank you very much. And Minister Luhrmann, what about foresight in the German context, and how useful is it to examine this at national level and combine it to the work that is done at the European level?
Well, thank you very much. I think it is very useful foresight and also all the strategic discussions we're having at conferences like this for writing strategic documents, such as the strategic agenda, and also writing documents at the level of European Council conclusions, for instance. No? I mean, Maros mentioned We now have come to agree, all of us, that there's something like strategic autonomy. Some still prefer to call it sovereignty, but anyway, something in this realm that we need to be better in the EU at also defining, defending, and building our economic resilience, for instance. So I think at that level, we're quite good. And we also have several units in our ministry dealing with this. But I'm still very skeptical that we're really good in following through. We have, at a high level, we understand, for instance, that we're extremely vulnerable because 95% of our solar cells imported to the EU come from one source, China. 95%. And we've all sworn, after Russia's brutal full-scale attack on Ukraine, that we'll never be this vulnerable again, right? I still remember every politician calling this. But have we really learned from this? Are we really drawing the lessons? Are we really changing the policies that are needed to be changed to make ourselves more resilient? And I really have doubts here. And I think the problem is that there are really still, even though we have these beautiful conferences, these beautiful documents, there are still a lot of limits to the impact of the work of strategic analysts and the foresight community, such as yourselves, on practical policies. I also discussed that with Stephen when he was in Berlin recently, very in depth. I think the limitations are, just very, very briefly, I just want to touch upon them. One is still there's a lack of translation between sort of the big research and strategic thinking and the actual policy instruments that are needed. Second, we clearly in the EU, at EU level, but also at national level, have a lack of agility. So if we see the world as changing, we don't change our policies fast enough. Maybe we cannot, particularly in federal states such as Belgium and Germany. We have a lot of stakeholders to be involved, right? So agility is a problem. And thirdly, and probably most seriously or significantly, we have a presence bias in politics. It's always, politicians are always concerned with the thing that's in the headline now, the crisis that's happening now, the press statement you need to do tomorrow, the party convention you need to convince on the weekend, and not implementing the strategic long-term things that are actually really needed. So this presence bias is really a huge problem, and I think it really hits us when we think about also all the consequences we want to draw from all the beautiful foresight work that we're doing.
Thank you very much. And I think this is a good connecting point for my next question to Minister Labib about the nature of power. I mean, you're the foreign minister, you've worked a lot in international politics. How do you see power changing?
So badly, by the way, we should be quite clear-eyed in face the recent geopolitical events has shown us that the driving force in international relations is more and more hard power politics. A few countries have unfortunately reverted to what I can say an old-fashioned toolbox of military action, hybrid threats, political pressure, economic pressure, commercial coercion, and propaganda tools as well. So this often take place in violation of our international rules-based system. So for a country like Belgium, respect for the international order and for the rule of law are central values. So these act as our compass on the international stage. And the real question now is how to safeguard the international order we value. It is clear that the international order is in danger. Today, Russia's attack on Ukraine is also an attack from a permanent member of the UN Security Council, violating the UN Charter's first principles. So today, Russia is blocking the UN. It is also blocking the OSCE, two institutions that are essential in the global architecture and in conflict resolution. So, and also a current event in the Middle East also remind us of our inability to enforce United Nations resolutions on the ground. We were 120 countries in favor, we have voted in favor of a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, but we are still not there. So facing this reality, it is crystal clear that the institutions that we have created in the aftermath of the Second World War must reform and reinvent themselves in terms of their functioning and also representation. And I say this because as Belgians, once again, we firmly believe in multilateralism, starting with the European Union, of which we are one of the founding and historical members. So for Belgium, the international order starts within the EU. So the EU's strength as a leading a player in the world is more than the sum of its member states. Together, I think that we have to keep in mind that we have been able to create a political and economic project, a project of peace and solidarity, which makes the EU a unique pole of attraction. We show leadership on the global stage, but also solidarity. The EU is the world's biggest development donor and a key actor also in conflict mediation. Nevertheless, the world is changing, becoming more and more polarized. So we have to find, to reconnect strongly and with our natural allies in countries in Latin America and also Africa. It means that to find other partners to reduce our dependency from big players, as Anna mentioned, from China, for instance, and Russia. And so we need to maintain a close ties with our natural allies, but also we need to find new ones. Undoubtedly, with these new ones, we have to reach new partners that maybe will not tick all the boxes in terms of rule of law, respect for human rights, and or sustainable development, because soon I'm quite convinced that we will have to ask ourselves the following question: do we still have the leverage to impose standards on business partners? Probably less and less no, and is some pragmatism necessary? Probably yes. So we have to help developing countries in reshaping their economies into high-end industrial process covering the full value chain, and this is what the EU Global Gateway is about, for instance.
Thank you very much. And Minister Leerman, we've talked about the changing nature of power, we've talked about the challenge to the international order. What does that mean for Europe, which has always invested enormously on a rules-based order and on multilateralism?
No, indeed, as Hadja explained, what we've seen in recent years is really a return of brute power to the world stage with Russia's brutal full-scale attack on Ukraine, but also with Hamas's attack, slaughtering babies, old people. This is really, I mean, this kind of brutality is really, you can't really find words to describe this. It's really brute, naked power, unrestrained power, violence. And what we have to set against that as EU is our idea, as you also mentioned the term earlier, of collective power, of multilateralism, of constraining oneself by agreeing on a set of rules and abiding by that. I mean, power is always about making somebody else do something that they wouldn't have done otherwise, right? And our idea of achieving this goal is by peaceful means, by multilateral means, by the rule of law, by norms. And I think what we need to do as EU now in this really challenging geopolitical arena is to enlarge this room of the rule of law, of abiding to norms, to values, to common principles, because we're stronger together. I mean, it's the whole idea behind the enlargement policy. And so I'm very grateful to the Commission that they have recommended also to take next steps with Ukraine and Moldova, for instance. And I firmly believe that if we make this EU enlargement a success, then we will also enhance this room of collective power, of multilateralism. But this is really no automatism. For this, we really have to do it right. We have to first really ensure that as an enlarged EU, we're really a stronger EU, a resilient EU, both in economic terms, but also when it comes to military might. I think in this current geostrategic arena, it's clear the EU also needs, and the European actors need military power. We also need our soft power, morally, normatively. Second, we need to be able to use that power. So we need to have the capacity to act, to take decisions. Also that everyone working here knows it's not a trivial task, particularly not after enlarging to even more member states. And we also need to really protect this normative order that's at the heart of the EU, the idea of the rule of law, of human rights, and also sharpen our tools here. So I think our answer to this change of power around us is to also become stronger, to become bigger, and to become more resilient.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in our vice presidents into the conversation. I'd also bring in two of the megatrends that the foresight exercises look at. So one is technology and the other one is climate. So on technology and the relationship with geopolitics, we're going through, and I'm turning to Vice President Angel, we're going through a technological revolution, but we're also going through weaponization of technology. So how can we look at these two aspects at the same time?
Indeed, you mentioned there's a technological race, and this race, the pace of this race is accelerating, and it goes faster and faster. Like in every race, in sports, everything goes always faster and faster. So we cannot stay there and look at others running, but we have to put our running shoes on and try to be as good and as fast as others are. And we have the possibilities. We shouldn't forget what we have. We should not, because we are maybe smaller than other continents, think that it's too late to compete, or when people tell us it's already too late. No, we have good universities, we have young talent, and we have world-beating regulation. I think this is something we shouldn't forget. I remember on GDPR what impact we had, and I hope we will have the same impact with the Artificial Intelligence Act, where we regulate, which does not mean that we stop development, but we are. This is also foresight to see what risks this can be, and then classify the risks, but not try to hinder the development of artificial intelligence. So I think we should have no complex and just go in this run, and things have been done already. Maros mentioned the strategic autonomy, which is a buzzword, but things are happening. The new industrial policies where we are very active in. And then last month, to be very concrete, in Strasbourg, in the European Parliament, we adopted the Parliament's position on STEP, which is the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, where we aim to boost digital, but also biotechnologies, and also the net zero technologies. And this shows that we are in the run, we are in this race, we are participating, maybe differently, maybe also trying to regulate more as others do. And I think this can also be our strengths. And let's not forget, we also have Horizon Europe, where we put more and more money in, and we know the importance of it. and therefore we should be confident, believe in ourselves. We are strong together, as it has been said, and we have this collective intelligence. We have these different schools. You know, I come from a very small member states where people go to universities in all over Europe and all over the world. In Luxembourg, because we only have a university since 20 years. It's good to have it, to have scientists coming, but for us it was so good to go. And when very concretely you come to a company and you work, you have one engineer who was in Geneva, in Switzerland, in Zurich, the other one was maybe in Great Britain, the other one was in Germany or in France or in Belgium, and there this collective and differences, this diversity can also be, when you put it together and you use it very cleverly, this is the strengths we have, different ways of thinking, different ways of learning in universities, and you put that all together, the advantages of all of this, I think these are good conditions to be able to participate in this race and not give up from the beginning, but be ambitious, and then of course use the work all these experts are doing and trying to overcome this overcome what you said, this bias of presence. This is for us policymakers the biggest challenge, and I can give you a very concrete example. I mentioned before the foresight we do in the Parliament, and in the Future Shocks report, the loss of biodiversity was one of the 15 identified shocks where we have to pay attention. And then when we come to vote the nature restoration law, we suddenly have to worry that this law does not pass. And this is something we have to change and have to learn. Yes, it's good to be ambitious at the beginning of a mandate and to have nice strategic views and ideas, but then when we come near to the election, suddenly to backtrack, we shouldn't do that, and therefore I'm happy that this conference is there and that you experts, you have to continuously, I don't know what other word I could say, as kick us a bit, that we stay on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking of climate, I mean, Europeans are very proud of the European Green Deal, but of course, if Europe is a green island, it's not actually going to save the planet. But implementing the Green Deal also requires partnerships to access critical raw materials, and some of this enters the fields of geopolitics. So, Vice President Šefčovič, can I ask you perhaps to comment on this topic, given that this is in your portfolio?
Absolutely, and thank you very much. If you allow just a couple of remarks on, I would say, the excellent intervention of my colleagues in the panel, because I think they described very well that what we are actually entering is something what I would describe as an era of the new power politics in the world. And be it a hard power, as we see coming from Russia, but be it also very assertive economic policies coming from our partners in the US, but also from tough economic competition from China. So I think that all this, of course, means that what we will see in the future would be something which, again, I would translate as more of a global transactionalism. What I mean by that is that we already witnessed for quite some time, especially in our relationship with the third countries, that we are kind of in the period at first of the battle of narratives, but now it's more and more in the battle of offers. And simply the world will not change to that, I would say, nice, rule of law based, international commitment respected, international law being always at the highest respect as we had it a few years and a few decades ago. And therefore, I totally agree with my colleagues. We also need to evolve. And what does it mean for the foresighters, be it experts or be it on the political level? Very often you are the messenger of what Al Gore so well described, inconvenient truth. How can you make the case? How can you describe the problem to the policymakers? And how can you also create, I would say, the political climate around your message, that it leads to the change, it leads to the actual actions being taken. And I think that's our collective responsibility, how to bring it to the attention of the top leader, how to work with the public opinion in the case of nature restoration law, to bring the arguments why actually we needed it. If we wouldn't act, that the first who would suffer the most would be actually the farmers, because the crops would go down, there will be no drought, there will be the fires, the harvest would be destroyed, as we have seen in Greece, where the Greek agriculture lost 22% of the revenue because of the terrible weather-related problems over the last summer. And I also agree with my colleagues here, agility and also being able to kind of fight with the good arguments that I would say it's human nature, insistence that if it works, don't fix it. Yeah. So this fear of change, fear of the new areas, and what you hear very often from your colleagues, we always did it like this. But do something always as it was done in the past, clearly in this new dynamic world would not work. And that's our, I would say, collective responsibility to try to change it and to kind of highlight that clearly the world is much, much different than it was just 5 years ago. And the same applies to the climate change, the Green Deal agenda. From one side, in Europe, I think we've been very diligent. We did our homework, and I think that we clearly have the most advanced legal framework for tackling the climate change. At the same time, I would say we all feel, and I think we discussed it with Anna, we need to intensify the engagement with our citizens to be sure that we will not lose the support for our policies, that we will bring the winning arguments, and we would work with the support of the public opinion, which I was always very proud of when we've been discussing different aspects of climate policies abroad, telling them that we are blessed in Europe with having such a support for policies tackling the climate change, for our ambitious greenhouse gas reduction measures, and so on and so forth. But it requires the work. We need to work on it, and I think it's again collective responsibility of the politicians to be ready for that engagement. One of the key elements of success of the green transition would be if we can do it in a just and fair manner, that no one and nowhere is left behind. And it's our slogan, that's our position, which we use for Europe, but I think that we really mean it if it comes to the international stage. Yesterday, we had a session of the College of Commissioners with the Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber to prepare for COP28. We clearly passed on this message. We are doing our homework. We are very diligent if it comes to climate financing. We are ready to have constructive discussion on the loss and damage fund. But at the same time, we need the engagement for big international partners. We cannot do it as Europeans alone, and it has to be this global mobilization. If from one side we want to be below 1.5 degrees of Celsius, look what's happening in the world, and we are now at 1.1. So let's imagine what would happen if it would be 2 or 3 degrees of overheating. So I think, the nature is clearly sending us very, very tangible signals that we have to do better. And that would be our extended hand in negotiations in Dubai. We need, as a mankind, to work very hard to make sure that this would be a global effort, be it through different instruments developed under COP28, but also through our, I would say, new program of the Global Gateway, where we want to work with our partners for the fair cooperation, where we are ready to share the value added, that we are not going to extract the critical raw materials, put them on the ship, and disappear with it, leaving the environmental damage behind with no value created, with no new jobs bringing to the country. We want to do it in a fair way that all would share the profits and all would benefit from the effort. So these are, I would say, the two tendencies which would be very important for European position in the world. Our clear position on COP28 on global climate policies, but also our extended hand in the close economic cooperation and the Global Gateway. Thank you very much also for the curtain raiser on the COP28. We're, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to be very, very brief in answering my next question, which is the same question for each of you.
Given that the next Global Trends report will be published in the spring ahead of the European Parliament elections, what one issue do you think should be addressed in the report? And I'll start with Minister Labib.
The impact of demographics inside and outside the EU in combination with climate change and geopolitical fragmentation. We all know that it will have a huge impact in the years to come, and in this sense we welcome the European Commission's first demography package. As uncomfortable as it might be, we should make no mistake on the fact that demographic pressure will continue to fuel mass migration, including to Europe. And we know how illegal migration has a destabilizing effect in our society, but we also know that well-managed legal migration can help to solve a number of domestic EU challenges, such as aging, lack of skilled labor, or loss of competitiveness. So to conclude, it would be very helpful if ESPAS report could have this kind of in his report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So demography, Minister Leerman.
Two very brief items. One, how the EU adapts to the climate crisis. Second, how the EU can work on enlargement in a way that it makes us stronger and more resilient.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go in the same order as speakers, so I'll ask Vice President Angel first.
Well, I was very active in the conference on the future of Europe, where 900 citizens participated, and 1/3 of them were between 16 and 25. And I fully agree with what they are afraid of, and what not afraid of, but what they think we should deal with is first climate change, biodiversity, combating inequalities, and promoting and most over protecting democracy. I think these are three things which are interlinked and which we should keep in mind. And often the citizens, they have a good sense of the future too. And this is what I would expect also from this report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice President Šefčovič.
I would say that I think what would be very important, especially if we look at the news bulletins every evening, to work more on the link between peace and well-being. Because I think if, and under the well-being, I don't mean only going beyond the GDP, but if we manage to work on standards of living, tackling the climate change, which is forcing a lot of people to leave their houses and becoming the global climate refugees. If we manage to bring, I would say, this new balance into the global politics, that would be, I would say, the great contribution. So to link peace with the well-being, Europe is a peace project on its own, and a very, I would say, unique, successful demonstration how the countries which have been for centuries involved in war, in conflagrations, can build something so peaceful that we have now in Europe. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you, dear panelists, and I'm really happy to you have such an exciting and eye-opening introduction in the conference. You will have the opportunity to do a family photo, and Rosa, you're going to stay here for the next session. Please, thank you.